Hi everyone, my name is Marcus and you're watching the Reef Nerd YouTube channel. Today we're going to do a setup guide on the Pacfic Sun Kore7th and KHLab. So I've been running the KHLab and Kore7th in full auto mode for a few months now. What that means is it tests my alkalinity 6 times a day and then automatically adjusts my dosing to either increase or decrease the amount that it doses according to my alkalinity test results. This means that as the consumption in my tank increases or decreases, the dosing reacts quite rapidly and is able to keep my alkalinity at a really stable level. It's a great piece of kit, the Kore7th. It has 7 dosing heads, and then combined with the KHLab is able to do the automatic testing and be really smart about the way that it functions. It's more than just a dosing pump or just an alkalinity tester. It's pretty much an all-in-one solution for your tank's dosing needs. It can also measure pH, temperature, and control external DC pumps for auto water changes. You control the Kore7th with an iPhone app, an Android app, or a Windows program. And that's the current state. However, there is a cloud service which is launching soon that will replace all of those apps with a single experience no matter what device you use. I'm currently a beta user of the Pacfic Sun cloud service, and I'll do a follow-up video once that's formally launched, but it's looking really promising. But for today, what I want to do is focus on how to set up a Kore7th, because whilst the user guides are extremely comprehensive and very detailed, they can be slightly difficult to follow because there's so many steps articulated in such detail. So I just want to run you through the basics of how to do it and some of the gotchas that I've learned through having set up a number of these Kore7ths now. So when you first get a Kore7th, there's a few things that you should do before you set it up on your tank. There are 3 major steps for setting up a Kore7th: updating the firmware, setting it up on your Wi-Fi, and then configuring it and calibrating it. I'm going to show you today how to update the firmware and then how to set it up on your Wi-Fi. Configuring and calibrating is pretty self-explanatory, but we'll run through that briefly as well in the interface on my iPhone app. I recommend updating the firmware before you set the Kore7th up in your sump or on your tank. It just makes it easier to access unless you have a really accessible sump. In order to update the firmware, you currently need either a Windows PC or a Mac computer. Unfortunately, updating the firmware is not currently available on any mobile device. As you can see here, I have a Windows PC that I'm using for updating the firmware. The other thing you'll need is a mini USB cable. Note, this is mini, not micro. If you're not sure of the difference, just Google it and you'll see the connection that I mean for a mini USB. You probably have one of these lying around from an old digital camera or an older USB device. On the back of the Kore7th, there's a port that you'll plug this into, and obviously then you plug the other end into your laptop. You then connect power to the Kore7th, and you should see the USB device become recognized on your laptop. From there, I'm going to show you the steps by doing a screen share of my laptop, and I'll run you through the rest of the instructions. Okay, so down the bottom in the start menu, you want to search for computer management. That should appear as the first option. You can click on that and it should open up a new window. From there, you want to click on Device Manager. It's in that left-hand side panel. And there's a section there called Ports, COM and LTP or LPT. You want to expand that out and you'll see in there USB serial port, and in my case COM4. It may have a different COM number for you. Remember what that is. Next, you want to open up the Pacfic Firmware Updater App. I'll put a link to the description below on where you can download that on the Pacfic Sun website. From there, click on the Settings tab and make sure that the COM port that is selected is the COM port that we saw just before from Computer Management. You then want to click Open File and select the latest Kore7 firmware file, which you should have downloaded from the Pacfic Sun website. Again, I'll put a link to that in the description below. Make sure that you always download the latest version before proceeding here. You should now press Update. You'll hear a beep on the Kore7th, and then you need to stick a pen or something small like a paperclip into this hole in the back of the Kore7 to push this hidden button. This will then initiate the firmware update, and you'll see the progress bar move along until it's completed on your laptop screen. Once it's completed, you simply press Finish or Close, and then you should also remove the power plug from the Kore7th and let it restart. Now that the Kore7 has the latest version of firmware and has restarted, we can connect it to Wi-Fi. So unplug any USB cable and make sure that it's powered back on. And then what you want to do is, using your phone or your computer, essentially join the Kore7th's Wi-Fi network that it broadcasts itself. This will be called Core_7th_0 and then 2 numbers, which will be unique to your unit. The password will be printed on your manual and will be Core00 and those same 2 numbers. Once you've joined that network, open your web browser and you're going to go to 192.168.4.1. At that point, you want to click from the link on the left-hand side, Wi-Fi station, and then you want to click on the link that says STA plus AP mode. From the list, you'll see your Wi-Fi network. Select it, enter the password below, and click connect. Watch the screen. It should come up with a green message that tells you what the new IP address of your Kore7th is going to be. Write this down. For me, it was 192.168.1.154. However, it could be different for you. In fact, it most likely will be different for you because everyone's router and IP allocation is different. The next thing you want to do is connect back onto your regular home network. That's your normal Wi-Fi network. And then you want to type that IP address into your web browser, just like we did before. If the same interface comes up, the ESP link interface, that means your Kore7th has successfully connected to your Wi-Fi and is accessible on your local network. From there, you now have an option. You can either proceed by setting up the Windows version of the app, or you can control your Kore7 using an Android app or an Apple iOS app. In my example, I'm going to be proceeding with the iOS app as it's the easiest for me with an iPhone, and I'll show you how to set it up from there. So here we have the Pacfic Sun Kore7th app for iOS. As you can see, you need to enter in the IP address of your Kore7th. That's the one that we wrote down before after we had it connected to our Wi-Fi. And to connect, you simply press the Connect with Doser button. A message will appear saying that you're connected. And from here, you can now use any of these menu options. Let's start from the top. About Activities. This gives us a summary of how much has been dosed from each dosing pump each day. Now, if you're using a KHLab and you have that set up like I do, pumps 1, 2, and 3 will be used by that, so they'll never show any dosing, as pump 1 is used to send salt water into the KHLab, pump 2 is used to send the reagent into the KHLab, and then pump 3 is the wastewater out. But for me, I have pump 4, 5, 6, and 7 all enabled. Pump 4 is my alkalinity, pump 5 is my calcium, and pump 7 is my magnesium. I'm using pump 6 to dose the Reef booster component of Reef anabolics, aka boron. We can see below there are some alarms as well, so a temperature alarm, a liquid low level alarm, an ATO alarm, high water level, and actual temperature. For now, the temperature isn't reporting through to the app, although I'm sure they'll update this shortly. The low level liquid alarm means that one of my reagent containers or macro element containers is empty. I'll show you how that works in a bit. The next area we have are the dose settings. So you can see you can adjust the dose settings for all 7 pumps individually. Let's go and have a look at pump 4, which is my alkalinity. You can see it has a name and it's turned on. I've called it KH Solution, and it's currently dosing 107 ml per day. It's dosing that 24 times a day, and it begins its first dose at 9:30 in the morning. Now that doesn't mean it doses 107 ml 24 times a day. It means it doses 107 ml equally distributed over 24 hours. You can see that you can change it from 1, 2, 4, 6, 12, and 24 doses per day. Below that, we have the liquid left in the reservoir. Now I've set that my reservoir is 1000 ml, and it's telling me that I have 437 ml left, which is enough for 4 days. If I was to refill it, I just press that refill button. Now when it gets empty, it only turns on the liquid low level alarm, but it won't actually prevent the pump from still running. So if you forget to refill the containers in the app here, but in reality you've actually refilled them, it won't affect the dosing. You have controls here to be able to manually start and stop the pumps, which can be useful, and you also have the ability to calibrate the pump down here. You simply put the output of the dosing line for that pump into a vial, press the start calibration button, and then you enter the amount of liquid that it actually pumps into that vial as the measured liquid amount. It should be right around 10 ml. We then have settings for the ATO or the temperature config area of the system. I'm not using any of this, so I'm not going to go through it, but it's all pretty self-explanatory and easy to set up. Same goes for the auto water change setup. If you were using external DC pumps, it can control those for that purpose. And then you have the pH ports. Now, pH probe 1 is used for the KHLab, and you can see that's currently reading 7.73. This is about normal. Don't be alarmed that it's a fairly low pH, as the water that is held inside the KHLab is always going to have a low pH because the reagent itself is an acid and has that effect. For probe 2, which for me is just sitting in my tank, you can see that it's reading my tank water is currently 8 pH. It's really easy to calibrate the pH probes. You simply soak the pH probe in the provided bottles of calibration fluid that come with the Kore7th, and depending on which bottle you're using, you would press the Calibrate pH 4 or Calibrate pH 7 option. I recommend soaking the pH probe for a good 5 minutes to allow it to stabilize before calibrating. Pacfic Sun recommends that you do pH 4 and then do pH 7, so that's the order you should calibrate in. Finally, we have the KHLab area of the system. Now you can see here it's showing my current KH or alkalinity reading of 7.66, and the previous reading was 8.3. I'm doing 6 tests a day, with the first test starting at 9:10. Now you can do more than 6 tests a day. You can do any of these, 1, 2, 4, 6, 8 or 12. It's recommended that if you're going to enable the KHLab to automatically control your dosing, that you should be doing at least 6 tests a day. Obviously, the more tests, the more rapidly the KHLab will be able to respond to any swings in your alkalinity. You set a minimum, a target, and a maximum. So my minimum is 7.5, my target is 7.8, and my maximum is 8. You tell the system what your aquarium capacity is in liters, and you can set a retest range. So if it swings dramatically outside of what the previous test was, it will test again just to validate that it wasn't in error. Beneath that, we have the calibration specifically for pumps 1, 3, and pump 2, which is the reagent pump. If you're using the KHLab, this is where you would calibrate those pumps. The instructions for calibration are laid out pretty clearly in the manual, but just quickly to go through it, you press this Calibrate Pump 1 button whilst the output is in the measuring cylinder on the scales that are provided with the KHLab, and you will run that calibration 5 times, recording your result. You then average the result and enter the value in the measured mil box and press set. Following that, at any time you can run a test. The test value should be identical to the measured value that you have set in here. You would do that for all 3 of them. I don't recommend calibrating a Kore7th until it has been running for about 2 weeks. When the units are new, they're prone to drift as they wear in, as the tubing settles, and due to a variety of other factors. If you calibrate it on day 1, you are essentially wasting your time because you will need to calibrate it again after a week or 2. So I wouldn't bother. Just run the unit and forget that you even have it for the first 1 or 2 weeks, and then spend your time calibrating it, and it will be much more stable and you'll save yourself a lot of time. The initial flush button is useful for when your KHLab is empty because you've either just installed it or taken it out to clean it for some reason. This will simply flush the unit with water and fill it up in preparation for then running a test. Under advanced settings, we have the auto mode setup. So if you turn this on, the KHLab takes control of whichever pumps you enable and will dose those pumps in equal amounts in order to maintain your alkalinity. This is great if you're using a balanced 2 or 3 part mixture, such as the Pacfic Sun Component 123 or any other balanced balling solution. If you just wanted to control alkalinity and have your calcium and magnesium dosed manually, you would only enable the pump which is connected to your alkalinity. In here, you essentially set which pumps should be on auto mode, and then you set the maximum amount of extra dosage that it can add once it drops below the minimum, and the minimum or the emergency threshold for where that amount would be dosed. You're also able to set a reference DKH if you wanted to calibrate your KHLab's alkalinity reading to another test kit, such as a Hanna checker or something like that. And here is the bottle capacity for the reagent mixture. As you can see, I've not set mine. That's why I have that low level liquid warning, which I showed you earlier. However, if you do set that, just remember to come in here and refill it every time you actually physically refill it. So that's all for today. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions about the Kore7th or the KHLab, and I'll do my best to answer them. I will be doing a follow-up review on the unit once the full Pacific Sun cloud service is available to everyone and out of beta. Because I think that will really change the game and put this unit well ahead of its competitors. But that's all for today. Thanks for watching. My name is Marcus, and you've been watching the Reef Nerd YouTube channel. Bye for now.